The first warning came not with a bang, but with a whisper of quantum static. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's prosthetic eye flickered, its quantum-linked neural interface catching the faintest distortion in the long-range solar tracking systems. She knew that signature. The Zentari were coming. The underground command center of Neutralized's primary defense complex hummed with a tension that bordered on electric. Holographic displays cascaded with incoming data, each screen a kaleidoscope of potential threat scenarios. Technicians moved with a precision that spoke of years of preparation and decades of fear. "Confirm quantum signature," Elena muttered, her augmented eyes zooming into microscopic data streams that would appear as meaningless noise to anyone else. Her fingers, more machine than flesh after years of genetic and cybernetic modifications, danced across holographic interfaces. A half-empty coffee mug sat precariously on the edge of her workstation. The mug itself was a relic, a piece of dark humor that had survived multiple planetary evacuations. Its faded text read, "Extinction is for losers," in bold, defiant letters. "Signature confirmed," called out Marcus Chen, the youngest quantum analyst in the room. His hands trembled slightly, betraying his otherwise calm exterior. Zentari long-range reconnaissance swarm. Approximately 3 days until main fleet arrival. The room went silent. 3 days. 72 hours. The amount of time that stood between humanity's survival and complete annihilation on this colonial world. Elena remembered the briefings, the historical records. Every species that had faced the Zentari hegemony before had been systematically erased. Entire civilizations reduced to scattered genetic data, their planets stripped of resources, their histories forgotten. But humanity was different. Humanity had something to prove. "Initiate protocol firebreak," she commanded, her voice cutting through the tension. Massive underground systems began to move. Entire city sections, constructed with a paranoid precision that spoke to humanity's survival instinct, began to shift. Massive electromagnetic shields powered up, drawing energy from the planet's core. Quantum-encrypted communication networks went dark, creating a communications web that would be impossible for the Zentari to penetrate. Marcus looked up from his console. "Dr. Rodriguez, the colonial evacuation protocols are not happening," Elena interrupted. Her prosthetic eye gleamed with a combination of technological precision and human determination. "We're not running. Not this time." The young analyst blinked, surprised. Every previous human encounter with the Zentari had followed the same pattern. Detection, assessment, evacuation, destruction. But Elena Rodriguez had a different plan. Outside the underground complex, New Terra looked deceptively peaceful. Terraformed landscapes stretched across carefully engineered continents. Agricultural drones moved across fields, their quantum processors already being reprogrammed for potential combat scenarios. Children in educational complexes were being quietly moved to reinforced underground shelters, their learning modules subtly shifting to include emergency survival protocols. This was a planet prepared for war. Elena pulled up a holographic image of the incoming Zentari fleet, massive quantum-linked ships that defied traditional physics, each vessel a living organism more than a machine. Their technology was generations beyond human understanding, or so every previous encounter had suggested. Her daughter's research notes were encrypted in her personal database. Months of genetic engineering, of studying the Zentari's biological infrastructure, of developing countermeasures that bordered on the impossible. The personal cost had been immense. Her daughter lay in a medically induced coma, the result of an experimental procedure that might, just might, give humanity a fighting chance. 72 hours, Elena whispered to herself. The coffee mug seemed to vibrate with potential energy, a silent witness to the coming storm. The quantum displays continued their dance of potential futures, threat scenarios calculated and recalculated with each passing second. But beneath the cold mathematics of survival, something else burned. Something the Zentari could never understand. Human determination. Human hope. The gathering storm was coming. and humanity was ready. The medical isolation chamber pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light that seemed to breathe with its own life. Inside, Dr. Aria Rodriguez lay suspended between life and something entirely unknown, a human experiment that had pushed the boundaries of genetic engineering far beyond any previously conceived limit. Elena stood before the chamber, her prosthetic eye running continuous diagnostic scans. The room was a fortress of sterilization and secrecy, buried 7 levels beneath Neutralized's primary research complex. Only 3 people in the entire human colony knew the true nature of what was happening here. "Final genetic sequence stabilizing," muttered Dr. Kaijong, the lead xenobiological engineer. His hands moved across holographic interfaces with a surgeon's precision. "We're looking at a 0.03% chance of full neural compatibility." Elena didn't respond. Those were the best odds they'd had in months. The story began years ago, during humanity's first catastrophic encounter with the Zentari. It was supposed to be a routine deep space exploration mission. Instead, it became a nightmare of genetic warfare that had haunted every human colony since. The Zentari didn't just kill, they systematically erased. Their bioweapons were designed to completely dismantle cellular structures, leaving nothing but molecular dust where civilizations once stood. But Aria had been different. Even as a child, she demonstrated an extraordinary ability to adapt. When other children would succumb to environmental challenges, she thrived. Her genetic structure seemed to be in constant, rapid evolution, a trait that had both fascinated and terrified her mother. "Synaptic bridge at 47%. Kai announced, his voice tight with concentration. "Neural mapping is unusual." The chamber hummed. Aria's body, modified beyond recognition, represented humanity's most audacious response to the Zentari threat. They weren't just preparing a defense. They were preparing to turn the Zentari's own weapon against them. Elena remembered the classified reports. Species after species had fallen to the Zentari. Entire civilizations reduced to genetic footnotes. But humans were different. Humans adapted. Humans fought back. "We're ready for Phase 2, she said quietly. Kai looked up, a mix of excitement and terror in his eyes. "Are you sure?" "The genetic cascade cold." "We don't have a choice," Elena interrupted. Her fingers traced the holographic display, showing her daughter's impossible genetic structure. Months of work, years of research, a lifetime of hope compressed into a single moment. The plan was insane. They would use the Zentari's own bioweapon infrastructure against them. Every genetic modification, every neural pathway in Aria's body was designed to not just resist the Zentari's destruction protocol, but to transform it, to make it viral, to turn extinction into evolution. "Initiating primary neural link," Kai announced. The room changed. Quantum encrypted barriers activated. Massive cooling systems engaged. If something went wrong, they could isolate this entire section of the underground complex in microseconds. Aria's body began to change. Her skin rippled with patterns that defied human understanding. Neural pathways began to form outside traditional biological constraints. She was becoming something more than human. A living weapon. A message to the Zentari that humanity would not go quietly. "Synaptic bridge at 82%, Kai's voice cracked. "Neural mapping is, my God." Elena watched, waited. Her prosthetic eye captured every microscopic change, every impossible transformation. This wasn't just a defense strategy. This was humanity's declaration of war. The chamber pulsed. Aria's body continued its impossible transformation. And somewhere deep in the quantum-encrypted systems of Neuterra, a message began to take shape. "We are not your prey. We are the predators." The impossible solution was coming to life. The first Zentari ships breached Neuterra's atmosphere like obsidian daggers cutting through silk. Marcus Chen gripped the controls of his quantum-adaptive fighter, the neural interface burning a cold fire across his cerebral cortex. This wasn't just a mission. This was humanity's line in the sand. Incoming vector pattern Delta, the ship's AI announced, its voice deliberately modulated to maintain pilot calm. Centauri primary attack formation detected. 17 major vessels. Estimated planetary impact in 17 minutes. Marcus knew the statistics. Every previous encounter with the Centauri had ended in total planetary destruction. Civilizations reduced to molecular dust. Entire species erased from galactic memory. Not today. The primary defense grid erupted in a symphony of quantum-encrypted energy. What appeared to be a devastating first strike was actually an elaborate trap. Massive holographic projections of Neutralized's primary cities flickered into existence, perfect decoys designed to absorb the initial Centauri assault. Engaging adaptive camouflage, Marcus muttered. His fighter, and dozens like it, weren't traditional spacecraft. They were living systems, quantum-adaptive biological-mechanical hybrids that could change configuration faster than the Centauri could track. Each vessel was part machine, part organic intelligence, born from decades of human desperation and innovation. The Centauri ships struck. Massive energy weapons that could obliterate continental regions discharged with surgical precision. The holographic cities absorbed the initial blasts, each explosion carefully calculated to look like total destruction. But underneath, Neuterra was very much alive. Massive underground complexes shifted. Entire city sections, constructed with a paranoid precision that spoke to humanity's survival instinct, began to move. Quantum-shielded urban centers came to life, their defensive systems rising from carefully engineered geological structures. Marcus broke formation. Suicide Run Alpha. He transmitted across the encrypted channels. Those words meant something specific to the human defenders. Not surrender, not retreat, but total commitment. His fighter transformed. Biological components merged with quantum-adaptive weapon systems. He wasn't just a pilot anymore. He was a weapon. 3 Centauri command ships exploded in rapid succession. The broadcast was deliberate, clear, precise. You picked the wrong species to mess with. The message wasn't just a transmission. It was a declaration of war. Centauri tactical systems struggled to process the impossible data. Entire attack vectors collapsed. Their perfectly synchronized assault became a chaotic mess of individual ship responses. Humans had always been good at breaking systems. Beneath the planetary surface, Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the initial engagement. Her prosthetic eye tracked multiple quantum-encrypted data streams simultaneously. This was more than a defense. This was a message to the entire galaxy. Adaptive response protocols engaging, she murmured. Every agricultural drone across Neuterra's carefully terraformed continents was now a potential weapon. Farming equipment became combat systems. Communication networks transformed into attack vectors. Children's educational quantum processors became jamming devices. The Centauri had made a fundamental mistake. They thought humanity was just another species to be erased. They were wrong. Marcus Chen's fighter continued its impossible dance across the battlefield. Each movement was a quantum calculation, each decision a split-second adaptation that defied traditional combat logic. One fighter against an entire invasion fleet, and winning. The first blood had been drawn, and humanity was just getting started. The medical isolation chamber trembled. Area Rodriguez's eyes snapped open. But they were no longer entirely human. Fractals of quantum-linked genetic code danced across her irises, a living testament to humanity's most audacious genetic experiment. Dr. Kai Zhang stumbled backward, his neural interface crackling with raw data. "She's awake," he whispered, the word barely capturing the magnitude of what was happening. Her mother, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, approached the chamber with calculated precision. The prosthetic eye that had been her own survival tool now scanned her daughter with an intensity that merged maternal concern with scientific ruthlessness. Aria's voice came first as a whisper, then as a quantum pulse that reverberated through the entire underground complex. "The weapon," she said, "it's not just a defense. It's a transformation. The Zentary's bioweapon, a genetic marvel designed to systematically disassemble cellular structures, had met its ultimate challenge. Humanity's desperation had created something impossible. A living countermeasure that didn't just resist destruction, but actively consumed it. Each of Aria's cells was now a weapon. The genetic modification wasn't just about survival. It was about turning the very concept of extinction on its head. Where the Zentary saw a precise tool of elimination, humanity had created an adaptive system that could transform threat into opportunity. Genetic cascade initiating, Kai reported, his hands dancing across holographic interfaces. Transmission vectors are impossible. Aria's body began to change, not in the way of traditional biological transformation, but as a quantum-linked system that redefined the very concept of cellular integrity. Her DNA wasn't just fighting the Zentary's bioweapon. It was learning from it, adapting, consuming. Outside the isolation chamber, quantum streams began to connect. The genetic countermeasure wasn't just a local defense. It was becoming a galactic-scale response. The Zentary designed a weapon of total elimination, Aria said, her voice now a harmonic of human determination and something entirely new. We're turning it into a weapon of total adaptation. Elena watched, a lifetime of research compressed into this single moment. Her daughter had become more than human. A living message to the universe that humanity would not be defined by its limitations. The first Zentary bioweapon transmission hit New Terra's outer defense grid and was immediately consumed. Kai's displays erupted with impossible data. The genetic countermeasure wasn't just blocking the Zentary's attack, it was learning, evolving. Each cellular interaction became a new piece of information, a new potential defense. Transmission complete, Aria said. Across the Zentary fleet, something unprecedented began to happen. Their precision bioweapons started to fail, not through traditional resistance, but through a complete reimagining of biological interaction. Where they expected total elimination, they found adaptation. Where they anticipated molecular destruction, they encountered growth. Humanity had turned the ultimate weapon of extinction into a tool of evolution. The isolation chamber hummed. Aria Rodriguez, part human, part quantum possibility, represented everything the Zentary could never understand. Survival was not just about resistance. It was about transformation. The genetic gambit had begun. The farm looked peaceful from a distance. Rows of carefully cultivated crops stretched across genetically optimized terrain. But this was no ordinary agricultural zone. Every piece of equipment, every drone, every sensor was about to become a weapon of war. Sergeant Maria Gonzalez stood in the central control hub, her fingers dancing across adaptive interfaces that blurred the line between farming equipment and military hardware. Around her, what appeared to be standard agricultural workers were actually the most versatile combat unit humanity had ever conceived. "Commence Operation Harvest," she commanded. The transformation was instantaneous. Agricultural drones that had been mapping crop health seconds earlier now reconfigured into a swarm of quantum-adaptive combat units. Irrigation systems became high-pressure plasma conduits. Automated seed planters transformed into precision targeting systems. Combine harvesters converted into mobile shield generators. This was humanity's true strength, the ability to turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. A group of children in a nearby educational complex watched their learning modules shift. Quantum processors that had been teaching mathematics now became communication jammers. Educational simulations transformed into tactical training scenarios. Every system was adaptive. Every tool a potential weapon. Zentary reconnaissance drones detected. The farm's central AI announced. Its voice was calm, almost conversational. Maria smiled. The first Zentary scout drones approached, expecting to find a standard colonial agricultural zone. Instead, they found a technological nightmare that defied every known combat protocol. Irrigation drones rose like metallic flowers, their sensors recalibrating into targeting systems. What looked like standard agricultural scanning equipment became a network of quantum-encrypted communication relays. Crop analysis satellites repositioned themselves into defensive formations. "We're not just fighting," Maria muttered. "We're rewriting the entire concept of warfare." Beneath the surface, New Terra's infrastructure came alive. Water treatment facilities became electromagnetic pulse generators. Power distribution networks transformed into adaptive communication grids. Every system was now part of a living, breathing defensive mechanism. A nearby mining complex erupted into action. Drilling equipment became artillery. Excavation drones converted into electronic warfare platforms. The very ground of New Terra was becoming a weapon. The Zentari scouts never stood a chance. Their first wave of reconnaissance drones was systematically dismantled by what appeared to be nothing more than standard colonial infrastructure. Each destroyed drone became a learning opportunity for the human defenders. Every technological interaction was analyzed, adapted, transformed. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the underground command center, her prosthetic eye tracking multiple quantum-encrypted data streams. This was more than a defense. This was a total reimagining of technological interaction. Adaptive response protocols at 97% efficiency, the central AI reported. Marcus Chen's voice crackled over the communication network. "They're not just confused. They're terrified." And he was right. The Zentari had developed their technological systems around a fundamental assumption that their targets would respond in predictable ways. Humanity was anything but predictable. A group of farmers, their equipment now bristling with adaptive weaponry, moved across the landscape. What appeared to be a standard agricultural patrol was actually a mobile combat unit that could reconfigure faster than the Zentari could analyze. "We're turning their precision into our chaos," Maria announced. Technological pandemonium was humanity's ultimate weapon. Every system was now part of the defense. Every tool a potential instrument of survival. The line between civilian infrastructure and military hardware had completely disappeared. New Terra wasn't just defending itself. It was evolving. In real time, the transmission began as a whisper. Deep within the quantum-encrypted communication arrays of New Terra, a message started to take shape. It wasn't just a signal. It was a weapon more potent than any physical arsenal, a direct assault on the Zentari's collective consciousness. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a massive holographic display, her prosthetic eye cycling through thousands of communication protocols simultaneously. "Prepare full-spectrum psychological engagement," she commanded. The message would become humanity's most audacious weapon. It started with history. Raw, unfiltered human history. Every challenge overcome. Every impossible barrier broken. Every moment of survival against insurmountable odds. The Zentari had spent millennia eliminating species that showed potential threat. They had never encountered a civilization that turned its own vulnerabilities into strengths. The first transmission wave carried the story of human resilience. Images of Earth's earliest struggles. Primitive humans surviving ice ages, navigating impossible terrains, building civilizations from nothing, overcoming plagues, exploring space with nothing more than mathematical calculations and raw determination. Each image was a quantum-encrypted data packet designed to do more than inform. It was engineered to destabilize. The Zentari's collective consciousness operated on a principle of absolute certainty. They saw civilizations as mathematical equations to be solved, threats to be eliminated, potential challenges to be calculated and neutralized. Humanity didn't follow any known equation. Marcus Chen's voice cut through the communication network, transmission at 78% quantum penetration. "They're attempting to block, but they can't," Elena finished for him. Each transmission carried multiple layers of psychological complexity. It wasn't just about showing human survival. It was about demonstrating an entirely different approach to existence. Where the Zentari saw elimination, humans saw opportunity. Where the Zentari calculated, humans imagined. The next wave of transmissions became more personal. Individual human stories. A mother protecting her child during a mining colony collapse. a scientist developing a cure under impossible conditions, a pilot navigating through an asteroid field with nothing more than intuition and skill. These weren't just stories. They were weapons. The Zentary's collective consciousness began to experience something it had never encountered before: doubt. Their perfectly synchronized attack protocols started to fragment. Individual ship commanders began to question the absolute nature of their mission. The mathematical certainty of human elimination began to crack. Psychological resonance at critical levels, the colony's central AI reported. Aria Rodriguez, still connected to the genetic modification chamber, provided additional support. Her quantum-linked consciousness began to interface with the transmission network, adding layers of biological complexity that the Zentary couldn't comprehend. The messages carried an underlying challenge, not just of survival, but of perspective. Humans weren't just fighting. They were redefining the entire concept of conflict. Each transmission carried multiple quantum-encrypted layers: visual data, emotional resonance, biological complexity, mathematical improbability. The Zentary systems were designed to analyze and eliminate. They were encountering something that defied analysis. "They're trying to categorize us," Marcus observed. "But we don't fit into any category." Belina watched the holographic displays. The Zentary fleet's synchronized movements were becoming erratic. Their perfect mathematical formations were dissolving into chaos. Humanity's ultimate weapon wasn't technology. It was the ability to be fundamentally unpredictable. The psychological warfare had begun, and the Zentary were losing before they even understood the battlefield. The quantum communication network fractured like breaking glass. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched in real time as the Zentary's supposedly impenetrable coordination system began to disintegrate. Her prosthetic eye captured every microscopic detail, a symphony of digital destruction that humanity had engineered with surgical precision. Recursive algorithmic disruption at 92% efficiency, the colony's central AI announced, its voice devoid of the excitement that electrified the human defenders. The breakthrough had come from the most unexpected source, deep within the genetic modification chambers, where Aria Rodriguez lay suspended between human and something entirely new. A fundamental flaw in the Zentary's quantum communication infrastructure had been discovered. It wasn't just a weakness. It was a systemic vulnerability that would redefine galactic warfare. Marcus Chen's fighter cut through the chaos, his quantum-adaptive vessel dancing between massive Zentary ships that were now struggling to maintain cohesion. "They're losing synchronization," he reported. "Individual ships are becoming isolated." The Zentary had built their entire civilization on the principle of absolute collective coordination. Every ship, every weapon, every strategic decision was part of a perfectly synchronized network. They saw individuality as a weakness to be eliminated. Humanity saw it as the ultimate strength. Elena's fingers danced across holographic interfaces. Each algorithmic injection was a precise strike, targeting the most fundamental aspects of the Zentary's collective consciousness. Where they expected perfect unity, they found fragmentation. The recursive algorithms are exploiting their hive mind architecture, Dr. Kai Zhang explained, his voice a mix of scientific excitement and strategic triumph. "We're not just breaking their communication. We're challenging their entire conceptual understanding of existence." Aria Rodriguez, still connected to the genetic modification chamber, began to interface directly with the disruption protocols. Her modified consciousness was more than human. It was a living algorithm that could think across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. The first Zentary command ships began to fall, not through traditional warfare, not through overwhelming force, but through a complete collapse of their fundamental operational principles. "They can't comprehend individual decision-making," Marcus observed. Each of his micro-movements became a strategic challenge to the Zentary's collective systems. Where they expected predictable responses, he provided chaos. Elena watched as entire sections of the Zentary fleet began to turn on each other. The perfect mathematical precision of their attack was dissolving into pure, unpredictable conflict. Psychological destabilization complete, the colony's AI reported. But this was more than a military victory. This was a fundamental challenge to the Zentary's entire philosophical approach to existence. They had spent millennia eliminating species that showed potential. They had never encountered a civilization that could turn their own systemic strengths into fatal weaknesses. Aria's voice cut through the communication network. Not as a traditional transmission, but as a quantum pulse that defied traditional communication protocols. Individuality, she said, is not a weakness. It's the ultimate adaptive mechanism. The Zentary fleet's formation collapsed. What had begun as a precision extinction protocol was now a cascading system of total failure. Individual ships began to make decisions that contradicted the collective's original mission. Strategic protocols fragmented. Communication networks dissolved. "We're not just fighting," Elena muttered, watching the holographic displays. "We're rewriting the entire concept of collective intelligence." Marcus Chen's fighter moved through the disintegrating Zentary fleet like a quantum ghost. Each movement was a challenge to their collective understanding. Each decision a living demonstration of individual adaptive potential. The turning point had arrived, and humanity was just getting started. The silence was more deafening than the battle. Scattered remnants of Zentary technology drifted across New Terra's orbital space like broken dreams. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the primary observation chamber, her prosthetic eye methodically scanning the cosmic debris. They had won, but victory felt nothing like what anyone had expected. Total Zentary fleet neutralization confirmed, the colony's central AI reported. Its voice carried no triumph, only clinical precision. Aria Rodriguez emerged from the genetic modification chamber, her body a living testament to humanity's most audacious scientific breakthrough. No longer entirely human, yet fundamentally human in her essence, she moved with a grace that defied traditional biological understanding. "We're going to study everything," she said quietly. The recovered Zentary technologies were more than just spoils of war. They were a library of potential. Quantum communication systems that redefined information transfer. Genetic modification techniques that pushed the boundaries of biological understanding. Propulsion technologies that made human space exploration look primitive by comparison. Marcus Chen guided his quantum adaptive fighter into the primary research hangar. The vessel was more living organism than machine, a perfect hybrid that reflected humanity's newfound approach to technological development. "We're not conquerors," Elena said, more to herself than anyone else. "We're students." The first interspecies research teams were already forming. Xenobiologists, quantum engineers, genetic specialists, all working to understand the technologies that had been meant to eliminate them. Where the Zentary saw threat, humans saw opportunity. Dr. Kai Zhang approached with a holographic display of preliminary research findings. Their quantum communication network, he explained, is essentially a form of collective consciousness we've never encountered. It's not just technology. It's a different way of experiencing existence. Aria moved closer, her modified consciousness interfacing with the research data. They never understood individual potential, she observed. Every challenge was a problem to be eliminated. We see challenges as opportunities to grow. The recovered Zentary technologies began to reveal themselves. Propulsion systems that could traverse entire galactic sectors in moments. Communication networks that operated beyond traditional dimensional constraints. Genetic modification techniques that made human research look like primitive sketches. But humanity would approach these discoveries differently. Not as weapons to be hoarded. Not as technologies to be conquered. But as knowledge to be understood. "We're sending the first research packages to every human colony," Elena announced. "Everything we've learned. Everything we've discovered. Total transparency." Marcus looked up from his post-flight systems check. "They'll be terrified," he said with a hint of a smile. "We're not following any of their expected protocols." And that was precisely the point. The Zentary had spent millennia eliminating potential threats. They had created a system of galactic control based on mathematical elimination. Humanity was introducing a fundamentally different approach. adaptation, curiosity, individual potential. Prepare the first diplomatic communication, Elena instructed the AI. Make it clear. We're not seeking revenge. We're seeking understanding. The communication would be sent to every known galactic civilization, not as a threat, not as a declaration of conquest, but as an invitation to a different way of existing. Aria approached the massive holographic display. Her modified consciousness began to interface with the communication protocols. We're rewriting the entire concept of first contact, she said. The recovered Zentari technologies would transform human civilization. Faster than light communication, genetic modification techniques that could eliminate diseases, quantum navigation systems that made current space exploration look like children's toys. But the real transformation was something more fundamental. A new way of seeing the universe, not as a place to be conquered, but as a place to be understood. The unexpected aftermath was just beginning.